Because his wife didn't like the carpets getting dirty, the man's first action he came home was to take off his shoes. But then the man suddenly realized his usually homebound wife wasn't there, and her phone was unreachable. Their daughter searched everywhere for Lisa but couldn't find her. By morning, Lisa still hadn't replied to any messages. At that moment, Mike realized Lisa might be in trouble, so he went to the police. The sheriff asked him when he last saw his wife. The man clearly said it was 10:20 a.m. the previous day. Such a specific time made the police a bit suspicious. It turned out Mike was the principal of a private school. His wife, Lisa, and their daughter were both teachers at the school. Their last meeting happened to be right after a class, which was why he remembered it so clearly. For an adult who had only been missing for a day, the police decided to investigate first. Their daughter, just out of class, found Mike. He was acting as if nothing had happened, coaching the football team. Faced with his daughter's anxiety and confusion, he only said the police would figure it all out. After school, the police drove to Mike's house. The daughter, already home, was searching Lisa's study for clues. Unexpectedly, she found a few pages in her mother's notebook. The words written on them made her expression change drastically. Instinctively, she pulled those pages out and hid them. The police followed procedure, first gathering information about Lisa. In her daughter's view, her mother was a very popular person with an optimistic personality. But one thing she felt was that her mother had too little sense of self. Her life revolved around husband. Another officer investigating upstairs found a powered-off phone under the bed in the master bedroom. The photo on the phone case made it immediately recognizable as Lisa's phone. This new clue was hard for the daughter to accept. In today's society, people might lose anything, but they rarely lose their phone. Besides, Lisa would never leave her phone under the bed. Given the current situation, she didn't dare imagine what might have happened to Lisa. To find out where she went, they decided to open Lisa's phone. But trying all sorts of passwords, anniversaries, birthdays, didn't unlock it. As night fell, the investigation had to pause. The next day, the police decided to check Lisa's bank account for clues first. The investigation showed that on the afternoon Lisa went missing, her account had a transaction at a bar. That bar wasn't exactly close, it required driving to get there. While sending someone to investigate the bar, the police intended to update Mike and his daughter on the new lead. However, while waiting for Mike, a neighbor came running out of the woods looking horrified. She had found a body while walking her dog. The woman, not noticing the mud on her feet, knocked on the door to tell the man something, but the man gave no reply. In her urgency, she stepped into the man's house. Seeing the mud tracked onto the carpet, the man lose his temper. If his wife came back and saw the dirt, she'd be furious. What Mike didn't know was that earlier, Officer Annie, following a neighbor's tip, had discovered a body in the woods. The victim was his wife, Lisa, who had been missing for days. Mike's daughter rushed home and saw her father clutching a cleaning rag. She understood his conflict and struggle. She didn't want to believe it was her mother, yet she feared that it was. Then Officer Annie remembered something. Mike's daughter had mentioned that next week was her grandmother's 75th birthday. Maybe that date was Lisa's phone passcode. Holding on to a last bit of hope, Officer Annie entered the numbers. The next moment, the phone unlocked. After checking the apps and various records, they found Lisa had hardly called Mike. Instead, she'd been frequently contacting a woman named Claire. If they could reach Claire, maybe they'd learn more about Lisa. After Officer Annie and her partner left, father and daughter sat silently in the living room. Seeing her father still so calm, his daughter suddenly felt he was a stranger. Her father refused to believe his wife was gone. Both of them waited anxiously for the police to confirm the results. The night passed quickly. Early the next morning, Officer Annie came to see Mia, who looked much more haggard. Mia seemed dazed, barely reacting to anything Annie said until Annie asked about her father. Unlike Mia, who was falling apart, Mike had acted as if nothing had happened and went to school in the morning. This time, Officer Annie wanted to understand if anyone had conflicts with Lisa, and to learn more about Mike and Lisa's relationship. Mia quickly realized that, in the eyes of the police, her father was also a suspect. The thought was too much for Mia to bear. She made an excuse to leave and collect herself. At the same time, Officer Annie received a call from a colleague, asking her to bring Mike and Mia to the station. Annie agreed and went to look for Mike. In Mike's office, teachers were discussing Lisa's disappearance. Officer Annie opened the door and asked for Mike to come with her to the station. But none of the teachers knew where he was. Instantly, Annie's heart sank. At such a critical moment, Mike's behavior was deeply suspicious. Seeing this, the school board decided to suspend Mike from his position. Meanwhile, still unaware of his suspension, Mike had driven to a supermarket. With clear purpose, he bought a jug of cleaning solution. The woman suddenly discovered that the wife everyone praised actually had a hidden side. In Lisa's phone, the contact saved as Claire was actually a man, Lisa's co-worker, Steven. The two had even been calling each other more often than Lisa called her own husband, Mike. In the weeks before Lisa disappeared, they had been in frequent contact. This close connection made Officer Annie suspect there was something unusual between them. Whether Lisa's disappearance was related to Steven, she needed to meet him to decide. So Officer Annie and her partner went to see Steven. After a brief greeting, Annie directly asked if he and Lisa had a special relationship. Steven didn't deny that they were attracted to each other, but he insisted they had stayed just friends and never crossed the line. However, Officer Annie noticed that during the entire time Lisa was missing, Steven had never tried to call her. He also didn't seem worried at all. so Annie asked him where he was on the Monday Lisa disappeared. Just then, Stephen's colleague came to get him. Stephen didn't answer the question and simply showed Annie out. His evasive attitude only deepened Annie's suspicion. Besides Stephen, Lisa's husband Mike was also a prime suspect. The priority now was to rule Mike out. Mike remained calm and firmly stated that he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance. On the afternoon Lisa vanished, he was coaching the school's football team. Many people saw him there. Mike's alibi was solid enough that Annie had to let him go for the time being. With the case going nowhere, the second suspect, Stephen, was called in again by the police. Right at the start of the conversation, Stephen tried to distance himself from Lisa, but Officer Annie didn't ask about that. Instead, she pressed him again about where he was that Monday. Seeing he couldn't avoid the question, Stephen finally said he had been at his family's vacation cabin. The neighbor had security cameras, so checking the footage would prove he was there. Following Stephen's account, the police went to the vacation cabin to review the surveillance. On the way, they happened to meet the female neighbor who had found Lisa in the woods. The neighbor stopped the officers and shared a doubt that had been weighing on her. She walked her dog at the same time every day, but on the Monday Lisa disappeared, she never saw Lisa. In fact, it was only 2 or 3 days after Lisa went missing that she noticed her in the woods. With this new lead, Officer Annie immediately began checking to figure out whether Lisa's disappearance was connected to Stephen. Officer Annie carefully reviewed the surveillance footage outside his home. What she found was that on a night after Lisa vanished, her husband Mike had driven to Stephen's house. He had hesitated at Stephen's door, but ultimately turned and left without knocking. Because of that footage, all of Mike's alibis for Monday fell apart. So they called Mike in again. This time, Mike stuck to the same story as before. He claimed he didn't know his wife's whereabouts and offered no explanation for his movements the night Lisa disappeared. Mike's unwillingness to talk meant the interview went nowhere. Without evidence, they had to let him leave. As the family liaison officer, Annie placed her hopes in conversation. She decided to try to learn more about Mike by drawing him out. Facing Annie, Mike wasn't as cold as he'd been at the station. He admitted he'd known about Lisa and Stephen's connection for a while. So on the day Lisa disappeared, his first thought was that she might be with Stephen. But when he got to Stephen's house, he couldn't bring himself to knock, so he just went back home. During their talk, Annie asked where Mike's daughter Mia was. Mike said bitterly that she'd moved in with her grandmother to get away from him. Mia blamed her father for her mother's disappearance, and Mike blamed himself too. Everything that had happened lately made him think of the warning from the headmaster before him. That person had advised Mike not to live in the school-provided house. It was the traditional residence for headmasters, where they both lived and worked. Keeping work and family separate, the former headmaster said, was an important step for a healthy marriage. But back then, Mike was overconfident and didn't listen. Later, he threw himself completely into his work. By the time he realized it, his wife had already given up on their marriage. This conversation lessened Annie's suspicion of Mike. How could a man filled with so much guilt toward his wife ever hurt her? That evening, during a meeting, Annie got a text from her boyfriend. He was already at the restaurant and couldn't find her. Annie was about to reply when her boss reminded her not to use her phone during work. Annie put her phone away and focused on the briefing. She never imagined that this small act would later lead to tragedy. The woman was so absorbed in cooking that she didn't realize the music had drowned out the doorbell. Her boyfriend, invited for dinner, rang the bell again and again. When Annie still didn't answer, he peeked through the mail slot. Hearing the music inside, he finally understood why she hadn't come to the door. He started pounding harder on the door. This time, Annie finally heard. She quickly turned off the music, apologizing as she hurried to open the door. But the next moment, she froze. Her boyfriend was pounding angrily, his face full of impatience and rage. His fierce expression scared Annie, and she instinctively stepped back. He kept banging on the door, refusing to let up. Hearing no response from Annie inside, he pretended to leave but actually went to another entrance. Little did he know Annie saw him on the security monitor. She moved faster, locking the door before he could try it. Seeing Annie still wouldn't open up, he switched tactics, declaring his love, speaking softly, trying to win her over. Annie didn't dare react, staying quiet until he finally left. She remembered not long ago, when her boyfriend's emotional outburst had disrupted her at work, getting her transferred to a desk job. Everything added up, and Annie lost all hope for their relationship. But just as that storm calmed, trouble arose with Mike. By the time Annie reached the scene, Mike had already been taken to the hospital. A colleague handed her a note Mike had written for her. Reading his words of guilt over his wife's death, Annie's heart sank. It sounded almost like a confession, but Annie still didn't believe Mike was involved in Lisa's death. Going back 2 days earlier, with no killer in sight, the police kept questioning Mike and his daughter Mia. Mia had been with her boyfriend all that time and had a solid alibi, but Mike had been alone, with no one to vouch for him. As the investigation stalled, Mia began to suspect her own father. She met with him and asked straight out if he had something to do with her mother's disappearance. Mike didn't answer. Instead, he opened the car door and got out. To Mia, his silence meant he was admitting it. What Mia didn't know was that Mike stayed silent out of helplessness and grief. He couldn't believe his own daughter suspected him.